To make your catch-all basket, you're going to need to gather supplies, so starting with a bucket of water and a towel, graphite pencil, scissors, some basketry tools or a flathead screwdriver, clothespins, wax linen, this will have a tapestry needle, and then a number of different sizes of reed. So the first thing we're going to use is a 1/2 inch flat. Those are cut to 18 inches. And then a number 2 round reed. There should be 2 pieces, each about 5 feet long. Everything else you can set to the side, and we will use it later. Beginning with the 1/2 inch flat reed, you're going to mark the center points. These are 18 inches, so mark them at 9 inches across. Or you can just mark the first one close enough to the middle and then mark the rest. Reed has an inside and an outside. So the rough side is what you're going to mark. That will be the inside of your basket. Trying your best to keep the smooth side facing the bottom or facing your work surface, which will be the outside. Mark all 10 pieces, and then once you're finished, you will put them into your bucket of water. I like mine lukewarm, just so my hands aren't freezing. And you want to leave them in there about 3 minutes until they are pliable. You will align 5 pieces of the 1/2 inch flat reed on your work surface, doing your best to align the midpoints and keeping them horizontal. Line them up the best you can, and then you're going to weave your first piece. So this is again a 1/2 inch flat cut to 18 inches, and you're aligning the midpoints, so the third stake down will be the middle of your base, and then you want to align this piece perpendicularly, weaving over and under to cross over those stakes that have been laid horizontally. The second piece you weave, you're going to go opposite, so instead of under over, you're going to go over under and cross these pieces. Once you do the piece to the left, you can do the piece to the right. If you did the piece to the right first, do the piece to the left second. Doesn't matter the order that these happen in, you're just trying to get a checkerboard of 5 pieces, crossing over 5 pieces, all woven together. As you make the space, it doesn't matter if things are perfectly square right away. You're going to go back and kind of zhuzh it and line everything up really nicely at the end. So you can kind of see here, I wiggle things around and try and make the reveals between the pieces as square as possible and as symmetrical as possible, so everything lines nicely and makes a nice square. You can see here, trying to make those reveals about as equal as possible so you have a nice woven base. Grab 2 pieces of number 2 round reed, and you're going to tuck them into the inside of your woven base. Tuck them the best you can. Sometimes it takes a little bit of finesse. If you can't get them tucked, grab a flathead screwdriver, place it between the 2 stakes to make space for those round weavers. Looking at the bottom of your basket, you're going to move 1 weaver to the left and 1 weaver to the right of the stake where you tucked them behind. Take the weaver to the left, pull it up and around the stake to the right, and tuck it down. Taking again the weaver to the left, you will go up and around the stake to the right, crossing over the weaver that you just placed and tucking it down. I like to rotate my project so that it's always working across the top away from me. Twining is a little bit tricky. The idea is you are twisting between the 2 stakes and crossing over each weaver as you do this. Twining feels more like twisting than weaving, so you are pulling that weaver to the left, up and around the stake to the right, and crossing over your other weaver. So you can see pulling the weaver to the left, up, around, and behind the stake to the right, keeping all of the working weavers on the inside of your basket. So the tails are always on the inside as you go around. You're going to twine one complete row, paying close attention to the corners. When you get to a corner, I like to hold with my left hand the stakes, kind of pinching everything to the work surface, and pulling the weavers with my right hand so that there's some tension around the corners. You don't want it too tight, but you want to make sure that the weavers are touching the stakes as you go around. And then once you get back to the point where you started, you're just going to keep on going around. So this is a continuous weave, meaning that there's no stopping and starting. You can just keep going and going. And there you can see where I started and how I kept going around. And again, magic of TV. You're going to twine 3 entire rows, being sure to keep those corners pretty snug, pushing everything down as you continue around all 4 sides and all 4 corners of your base. Once you get back to where you started, you are going to tuck the tails of the round reed, similarly to how you started the twining. So you will push the 2 tails into the inside of your basket, which should be on the bottom. And then I like to trim my tails a bit. So about 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch long is perfectly fine. Just enough that you'll be able to tuck them in behind the 1/2 inch stake on the bottom of your basket. Sometimes it's really helpful here to use that flathead screwdriver to make space for where the round reed needs to go. You can also just kind of jam it in there. It's just enough to keep everything secure. Kind of pinch it between my 2 fingers. Kind of work it into the space between those 2 stakes. And you can see what it looks like. That's the outside and that's the inside. It is time to upset this basket. So you can put the first pieces of weaver that you're going to use, which will be 11/64 flat reed. You can take and stick those in your water bucket while you do this. So here I am using my hands and fingers to just gently push these stakes toward the middle of the basket. So my thumbs are on the outside of the bottom, and my fingers are kind of working everything toward the middle. The idea here is you don't want to snap the reed, you just want to encourage it to go in the direction we're headed, which is to make some walls. Taking that soaked piece of 11/64 reed, going to find the outside, so the smooth side of this piece of reed. You can do that by slightly bending it in your fingers and seeing which side is hairy. And we are going to place this weaver on the outside of the second stake in, about halfway across. And then weave over under. This is a plain weave. So you will go under, then over, then under. And you can see here I'm putting a clip on the end of that first weaver that I placed. The first 3 rows of any basket are typically the most challenging. Don't get frustrated, just take your time. As you weave over and under, you use your hands the best you can. I left everything real speed for this first row because I know that it helps to kind of watch what I'm doing and then manipulate your hands in a similar fashion. I like to pay close attention to these darn corners on these first few rows, so kind of leaving my tailing hand, which in this case is my left hand, pinching the inside corner. So the 2 stakes and the weaver, as I go around, I hold that steady. And then I use my weaving hand, my active hand, which is my right, and I go over or under, depending on the corner, moving that through the weaving pattern. That just kind of helps if you're pinching with that tailing hand to make the shape, as you're leading with your weaving hand to get the weaver into place. When you get back to the clip, to the row where you started, what you do is you weave right over that tail that you placed at the beginning. As you weave over the tail, you are pinching it between the weaver and the stake. So it will pinch those that tail in place, and you will weave over 3 rows, cutting at the 4th. So you directly overlap 3 rows, and then you snip at the 4th with enough tail left over that you can tuck it behind that 4th stake. Then to weave the 2nd row, you rotate the basket a 1/4 turn. What this does is this makes it so that your overlapped pieces are going to be on a different wall every time you go around. So instead of building up one wall with all of your overlaps, it will move around the basket and help you keep a better shape. So you weave the 2nd row exactly like the 1st row, except instead of going over under, you're going to go under over. So the opposite of what you did in the 1st row. Using the same method of pinching with your tailing hand, kind of shaping with your tailing hand, and then weaving with your active hand, so your front hand. I do a lot of pinching with that backhand, and again, using the kind of stakes here, you want to manipulate the best you can to keep everything as straight and upright as possible as you go around. Grab those clothespins and pinch the corners as needed, or pinch the weaver as needed to kind of hold it in place as you go around the basket. And when you get to whatever clothespin you have on a previous row, just pull it out and keep weaving, and the next weaver will hold that previous weaver in place. On your 2nd and 3rd rows, you finish them exactly as your 1st one, so you overlap for 3 rows and you snip on the 4th, leaving enough room for that tail to tuck behind that stake. Once you finish the first 3 rows, go around and make sure that the shape of the base is how you want it, and then you can continue on weaving the sides of your basket. Using the Catchall kit, I have created a pattern that I'm going to weave, working from the bottom of the pattern to the top. And I'm starting off with some natural, this is 1/4 inch natural, that will get woven in exactly the same in a plain weave fashion, using my leading hand to weave the plain weave and my tailing hand to do a lot of the shaping. As I go around and add colors to the basket, this is a 11/64 brown flat that I'm weaving in here. I like to pay attention to the shape. So shaping is an art, and a lot of it is controlled by the position of the stakes. So you want the stakes to be pulled apart where you want the basket to be wider, and pushed together where you want the basket to be more narrow. So as I'm building my walls, you can see I'm pulling apart my upright stakes pretty frequently, trying to keep them not only straight, but create additional space in between. Here I'm adding a wider weaver. So this is a 3/8 inch dyed brown weaver. And when you work with the wider weavers, they tend to be a little bit thicker. So you're going to want enough space between your uprights to add something like this, which requires a little bit of shaping. Weave it in exactly as any of the previous flat weavers, overlapping for 3 rows and snipping on the 4th, tucking in the tail behind the stake. And continuing my pattern, I did a pattern that is the same or very similar from the bottom to the top. So it kind of has the reflecting point of the wider brown weaver, and then a repetitive green, and then alternating reds and browns. I finished off the pattern with some natural weavers, so 1/4 inch and then an 11/64 to top it off. And then I was finished with my pattern and ready to do the final weaver. It's time to grab the reed that is packed for the rim. So this is the final weaver. It is a 3/8 inch natural piece of weaver that will be used to weave the final row. The final row is woven exactly like all of the other flat weavers of your basket. This weaver is 3/8 of an inch, and it is a particular size because of the rims that we are using for this basket. They are 1/2 inch pieces of rim, and this 3/8 inch weaver is actually hidden. So in the next steps, you will be tucking the stakes over this weaver to lock it into place. And there is enough space with this 3/8 inch weaver and the rim filler to tuck everything together and give it a nice finish at the end of the basket. You are ready to tuck these stakes and get the rim ready to finish. So there are stakes that ended up on the inside of your final row and stakes that ended up on the outside of your final row. So the stakes that are on the inside of your final row will get trimmed. Grabbing your scissors or shears, just cut the best you can those inside weavers flush with that top row. You might need to give your basket a little dunk before this. You want these stakes to be nice and pliable, so pretty soft for these steps. Once your inside stakes are trimmed flush, you want to turn to the outside stakes. These need to be shaped to a dull point. So I like to give mine a trim to about 1.5 inches, should be about right for this basket. And then shape them to a dull point by trimming either side of that stake. Once all the stakes are trimmed, it's time to tuck them. I like to go around and shape the stakes similarly to when you are upsetting your basket. I like to pinch the stakes between my 2 fingers and encourage them up and over the final row. This will encourage the stakes where they need to go once you get to the tucking step. Make it all the way around your basket, kind of encouraging each of those stakes. Once everything is ready, then you can start tucking the stakes into the first 2 rows of weavers that are inside of the basket. So you skip over the final row of weaver that you have, so that 3/8 inch row, and you tuck behind the 2 subsequent weavers. So you can see here kind of how that tucks in. You go over the 3/8 inch row, and then you tuck behind the next 2 rows of weavers inside of the basket. So I kind of fold it the best I can and push them down the side. And again, if any of those little hairs pop up, you can just give them a little trim. So trying to show you where those 2 rows of weavers are. You continue the tucking process the entire way around the rim of your basket, and it's really helpful to grab that flathead screwdriver or a basket weaving tool and stick it between the stake and those 2 weavers that you're trying to tuck between and make space. So you can see the weaving tool kind of being jammed in there a little bit to make enough room for those pointed stakes to be tucked into the basket. Tuck your hidden row the entire way around the basket, and once you get everything tucked, it's a good time to clean up any of those little hairs. The body of your basket should be complete and ready to put the rim on. Take the wax linen thread and tie it onto the basket. I like to do this by going through the face of the basket, pulling the tapestry needle through the inside, and just tying it on with the granny knot or whatever your knot of choosing is. You will not see this, but you want to make sure that the wax linen is secure. I am tying it to the hidden row, so that 3/8 inch row, and you can see here what that looks like. Take your wax linen, ball it up, and tuck it into the inside of your basket. You do not need this right now, but it's important that it's sitting on the inside for when we sew on the rim. Take your rim filler and 2 pieces of rim and get them ready to assemble. You also will need all of your clothespins for this next step. Take a piece of the rim reed and align it to the diameter of the basket by clipping one end with the clothespin and wrapping it around, overlapping about 1 inch, and then giving it a snip. You will repeat this process for the inside rim to give you the length of reed that you need. Take the other piece of rim reed and align it to the inside of the basket, leaving about a 1 inch overhang and giving it a snip. One last time for the rim filler, you will go around the diameter of the basket, leaving a 1 inch overlap and giving it a snip. Find where you tied on the wax linen and align the inside rim, the rim filler, and the outside rim to the left of this knot. Clip the whole bunch into place with a clothespin, and you will work the entire way around the rim, clipping the inside rim piece, the rim filler, and the outside rim together. This is a great time to check to make sure that your wax linen is inside of your basket. If it is not, go back and put it back in the inside. You don't want to have to troubleshoot afterward. Working with your clothespins and pinning on your rims, you want to work clockwise. This way you're collecting all the slack as you go around. You want to try and line up the inside and outside rims so they are flush and the rim filler sits nicely between the 2 rims. So ideally, when you are working your fingertips around the top of the basket, it's relatively smooth. Once you are all clipped up and ready to lash, you will find your wax linen and tapestry needle inside of your basket and pull it out. You only need to have a singly threaded needle. So work through the front face of the basket. You're going to find where your wax linen is tied off. Identify the stake next to that, to the right, and lash between the 2 stakes and the hidden row. So you will go from inside of the basket to the outside of the basket, stick your tapestry needle between those 2 stakes and the hidden row, push the needle through, and sew up and around the rim. The purpose of the lashing is to hold the rims and rim filler onto the hidden row. And on this basket, we're doing a double lashing. So you will first go around counterclockwise, and then you will turn around once you hit your end point and go clockwise. So again, align the needle between the 2 stakes and the hidden row. Push the needle through the face of the basket and then pull the wax linen through the inside. So up and over between those 2 stakes and the hidden row, and pull the wax linen until it is flush. I like to give it a little bit of tension, not too much because things are still a little bit damp. As you lash, work to keep the wax linen at a similar angle for every stitch. This will give the rim a nice clean look. Once you arrive to the points where your rim is overlapped and your rim filler is overlapped, you're going to want to pinch everything together and then lash as you have been around the basket, paying attention to where the rim filler lies. If you need to, take your scissors and make a blunt end on the rim filler so that it will tuck nicely between your two rims. You don't want your rim filler to sit proud. You want everything to be nice and flush. If you need to take a break as you're going around and lashing, just take your clothespin and pin everything together to hold it in place, and then take your pin out and get right back to it. Once you have lashed over top of your overlap sections and you are back to the start point of your first row of lashing, you will turn around and begin lashing in the clockwise direction. So exactly as before, you will go up and around from the inside through the face of the basket, but this time, instead of going to the stake to the right, you will be going through the stake to the left. Again, finding the space that is between the two stakes and the hidden row, and continuing around in the clockwise direction until you get back to the starting point. As you double lash, you can place your crossover at any point along your rim, and it's totally a style choice, so either the top or the front or the inside. Lash the entire second direction until you get back to your starting point, and then you will tie off your wax linen. I like to do this by going through the inside of my basket and looping around that initial stake so you can't really see this knot. So I go through the inside of the basket to the outside of the basket and then back through, creating a loop, and then I tie off on this loop, making a nice snug knot. I prefer a double knot just to get a little extra security, and then pull through with some tension. Once knotted, you're ready to snip off the excess wax linen with the shears, and your basket's done. I like to go around and clip off the little basket hairs with my shears, making the surface as clean as possible, and then shape the rim with my hands until it is the shape that I would like, and leave it on my work surface overnight until it's dry. And you are ready to go and put anything that you want inside your catch-all basket.